Russia's invasion of Ukraine has undeniably rattled Europe, prompting many countries to ask whether they are prepared for an expanding war. Military analysts have spent years speculating about what a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia could look like. But what if that confrontation doesn't begin with ground troops crossing a border? What if it's already started? Across Europe, people have been caught photographing military sites, sabotaging railways, starting fires, and carrying out other tasks at the bidding of Russian intelligence. Others aid in cybercrimes targeting security and defense sectors. Many of these people aren't trained spies. They're part of a new tactic of hybrid warfare in which anyone, students, delivery drivers, people looking to make money online, can be weaponized. I'm Anna Belliker, reporting to you from Kyiv. This week, we're going to look at how Russia recruits saboteurs in the digital age, and why stopping them has become one of Europe's most difficult security challenges. Now, before going further, it's worth clarifying what we mean by sabotage. When soldiers destroy a fuel depot with a drone, that's a military operation carried out by lawful combatants in an armed conflict. But when civilians secretly gather military intelligence, or damage critical infrastructure, or assist a foreign intelligence service, they're no longer acting as ordinary civilians. Depending on the country and the circumstances, those actions can be prosecuted as sabotage, espionage, or treason. Now, Ukraine has lived under threat of Russian sabotage since at least 2014, but the campaign has increasingly spread across Europe, particularly after the full-scale invasion and particularly in countries that border Russia. Just this summer, Poland, the Baltic states, France, and Germany have all warned of growing Russian covert activity, targeting infrastructure, military facilities, and supply chains connected to support for Ukraine. The themes among targets reveal Russia's broader objective. European investigators say that these operations aren't about achieving military wins per se. Instead, they're designed to test weaknesses in Europe's defense, to slow down military aid to Ukraine, to force governments to up their security budgets, and to create uncertainty from within NATO countries. More than 1,100 Ukrainian civilians have been accused of carrying out acts of pro-Russian sabotage in Ukraine since 2022. Dozens more saboteurs have been apprehended in Poland, the Baltics, and other European countries. But before looking at how it works, it's worth asking a more fundamental question. What exactly is Russia trying to sabotage? Because as I alluded to in the intro, sabotage encompasses a wide range of crimes. An agent might pay a civilian to take photos of military sites, to observe social hubs where troops congregate, or to find out the location of defense manufacturers. Or they might enlist them to perform an outright crime, a cyber attack, arson, or even an assassination. And this is what officials increasingly describe as hybrid warfare, using sabotage, espionage, cyber attacks, disinformation, and political pressure to weaken an adversary without triggering a conventional military confrontation. Rather than treating these incidents as isolated crimes, many European governments now see them as another front in Russia's war against Ukraine, one that extends thousands of miles beyond the actual front. Unlike how we think of spies during the Cold War, however, many of the people carrying out these operations for Russia on foreign soil are not highly trained intelligence officers. They're ordinary civilians, mostly recruited online, paid to complete a single task or part of a task, and then they're discarded with little recourse to identify whoever gave them the assignment. So who are these people? How has Russia shifted towards this model of recruitment? We'll find out in a second. I'd just like to take a moment to thank you for watching this video and make a quick request. If you haven't done so already, please hit the bell icon down below to be notified when new videos from the Kyiv Independent are available. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, please do and help us hit 500,000 as soon as we can. As always, if you'd like to get more involved in the Kyiv Independent community and unlock a whole host of membership perks, there will be more information at the link below. Thank you also to everyone who donates directly via YouTube. Your support is greatly appreciated. There isn't a singular profile of the kind of person who commits sabotage for Russia. Investigations in Europe find that money is a bigger incentive than ideology for most of the people who are found guilty of helping Russia. And obviously, finding people to commit this kind of crime has become much easier with the rise of the internet, smartphones, and encrypted messaging apps. If you think of the partisan movements and spy rings of prior wars, you can imagine how much more physical effort and covert communication went into operations that can now be achieved with just a few disappearing messages on Telegram. A task can be pitched, an acceptance received, and a payment sent without two people ever meeting face to face, or even knowing each other's names. The goal is not to build a long-standing relationship between an agent and a cultivated asset. It's to find someone to carry out an immediate task for a one-time fee, like an anonymous driver on a delivery app. And I mentioned Telegram because it's the app most widely linked to Russian sabotage recruitment efforts. There are several features that make it convenient for this. Users can both follow broadcast channels and send private messages, so your activity in public channels can then be tracked by people who have the ability to reach out to you directly. So if you're active in any public channels, you can be observed and profiled. And what are these Russian agents profiling for? Well, most obviously, they look for users who are liking and resharing pro-Russian or anti-Ukrainian content. Now, Telegram is pretty unmonitored when it comes to that stuff, and there are public pro-war groups with hundreds of thousands of followers. So agents might reach out to active members of one of those groups with an innocuous pitch of paid work, or they might be more explicit in calling for aid in Russia's war against the West. Either way, a 2024 investigation by the OCCRP found that it only takes a small amount of engagement with a recruiting profile, which go by names like Privyet-bot or Hello Bot in Russian, before you're being offered money in exchange for committing a crime. Indrek Kanek of Estonia's International Center for Defense and Security called this tactic trash phishing, in the sense that only a small number of contacted targets will actually end up committing crimes on Russia's behalf. But that's kind of the point. It costs almost nothing, in money or liability, to cast a wide net online. But if just 1 in 100 people agrees to take a photo or start a fire or plant a bomb, it can incur huge sums in damage and create widespread panic. And for Russia, that time trade-off is clearly worth it. And obviously, these kinds of one-time offers are more likely to land with people who are in financially precarious positions. Russia targets migrant groups in Europe, particularly Russian-speaking migrant groups, which does include some Ukrainian war refugees. And you can see why it's beneficial for Russia to be able to point the finger at Ukraine when a crime is committed in the EU. Russia also reportedly targets people who are already involved in low-level crime and are inured to it to some degree. Men are targeted more often than women. And for a variety of compounding factors, another demographic has emerged as a key target: teenagers. Russia has specifically targeted minors to carry out crimes. Of the more than 1,100 Ukrainians accused of pro-Russian sabotage between 2022 and 2026, a reported 1 in 5 was under the age of 18. And that seems shocking, but it kind of makes sense when you think about it. Children typically have unregulated internet access, limited savings, and an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. A teenager is less able than an adult to spot a setup or to think through implications, so being offered $100 to photograph some buildings might sound like a really good deal. In the reported cases of this happening, money was deemed more of a motive than ideology. It's not so much about radicalizing kids against Ukraine as exploiting their naivete. And again, this is not limited to Ukraine. At least 12 minors were arrested across Europe last year for Russia-related sabotage and spying incidents. We spoke with cybersecurity expert Konstantin Korsun about how it all works.
Just imagine you are a FSB officer and you're looking for people to recruit for your undercover operation or sabotage operation or etc. First step you should do. You go to any threads, any topic in Telegram or any other platform, and you should find the people with the pro-Russian comments, expression their loyalty to Kremlin, to Russia, to Russian politics, to Russian war. And then you should be sure those people are from Ukraine. They're physically located in the territory of Ukraine. Mainly, those people are teenagers because of lack of money, most of all, because of age. No stable work, some narrow condition, or maybe some troubles, life troubles, etc. Adult people normally not so open for any kind of money opportunities. If we're talking about how to prevent recruiting in messenger and social media, I don't know effective methods on that. It doesn't work completely anywhere, not only in Ukraine, including every country worldwide, including US, UK, Germany, Japan. Only China is able actually to control everything within their territory concerning network, the social network. It's prohibited. All Western social media are prohibited, completely banned within the China, that country. So it's for democracy society, for free countries. It's a big problem because no one can control everything in messenger, in social media. No one.
As I said in the introduction, summer of 2026 has seen multiple European countries issuing stark warnings about increased Russian sabotage efforts. This issue is compounding and escalating, and as the EU's Kaja Kallas said at a press conference in Ireland in June, even countries that seek to maintain a neutral military status are not exempt from the threat.
No country in Europe is off Russia's target list. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we have seen a surge in the hybrid attacks and sabotage, including against critical infrastructure such as the undersea water cables.
And yes, it's notable that that message to Ireland came from an Estonian with first-hand knowledge of Russia's hybrid warfare. All of Europe is at risk of increased Russian sabotage because Russia is showing no sign of stopping in Ukraine. They already moved beyond it long ago. I'm joined by Kira Giles, an expert on Russia's military and security strategies, to talk about why Russian sabotage is on the rise in Europe, how it plays into both the war in Ukraine and future conflict with NATO, and what immediate steps need to be taken to counter it.
We've seen some people, even government agencies, describing quite confidently what they think Russia is trying to achieve. And very often the explanation is they want to deter European countries from supporting Ukraine. And the Kremlin hopes that by carrying out these acts of sabotage across Europe, that will get the message across that there is a downside to siding with Ukraine. But that hasn't been communicated in any meaningful way to Europe. So there are other possible explanations for what's going on. One of the most convincing ones that we find is the way in which, if you strip away some of the random noise, some of the apparent nonsensical attacks, the burning down warehouses, shopping centers, attacking politicians' cars and so on, there is a core of incidents which actually have a point. And that point is focused on logistics and communications and emergency support for the population, the things that would keep Europe working in a crisis and keep things moving across the continent, including military reinforcements towards the site of where Russia might be trying to do something. Now, if you look just at that solid core of things that actually have a clear purpose, it does look very much like Russia testing the ground and preparing for when it might be considering launching a further military attack in Europe and being able on demand to make sure that Europe is unable to respond and unable to move in response.
What are sort of the things that have proven effective at cutting down rates of this, at least in a reported sense?
Well, individual countries have taken their own countermeasures. Now, in some ways, the problem that we have with what's often described as hybrid warfare, the way in which Russia messes in other countries without actually rolling tanks across the border, is that closing down the avenues for them to do that is indistinguishable from good governance, because they exploit people who are disaffected. They exploit disorganized crime, local idiots, their grievances that are within society already, which they use to actually set people against each other in the target countries. The more those are reduced, the harder target a country is. But then also some countries have been considering options of retaliation against Russia, means of imposing costs on Russia explicitly linked to this in an attempt to make it stop. The difficulty there is that no one country can do this on its own. You can't have a small neighbor of Russia which is engaging in a deterrence conversation with Moscow unless it's absolutely sure it's got the support of the rest of Europe or the EU or NATO. And that's what seems to be missing so far, a commitment by those larger groups of countries to actually take collective action to bring this to an end. When looking at the spread of attacks across the continent and also the spread of responses by victim countries, there are a few patterns that come out again and again. First of all, the countries that are responding and that are taking the problem seriously tend, as always, to be the frontline states, the ones in the east of the continent, the ones closest to Russia, because they understand most clearly what is at stake and what this could be a preparation for. You still have countries west of Warsaw that tend to think they are insulated from the problem by distance because it's happening at the far end of Europe, overlooking the fact that Russia has put vast amounts of effort into being able to strike at immense distances. Not only the long-range missile systems that we see pouring into Ukraine night after night, launched from thousands of kilometers away and therefore perfectly capable of striking at the far reaches of Europe, but also the cyber attacks, the proxy attacks, all of the ways that Russia can reach far beyond the frontline states and reach into those softer targets, the societies that have not prepared themselves, that are less resilient, that have not put effort into civil defense and awareness of the threat, and most of all have not educated their populations as to the problem. And that, of course, is where Russia will get more return on investment.
Gone are the days of intricate spy networks and long-time cultivation of key assets. Here are the days of disappearing messages, Bitcoin payments, and more. As Kaya Kallas warned, choosing military neutrality does not insulate a country from Russian hybrid warfare. It's clear that this kind of war has already been brought to NATO territory and is not going anywhere. There will always be teenagers and other vulnerable people willing to do tasks for money. Media literacy and public policy can only go so far. The real end to Russian sabotage will come only when the system that perpetuates it is brought down, something that Ukraine has known for a long time, and which allies would do well to take as seriously.
Hello, everyone. I'm Oleg Sukhov. I'm a reporter for the Kyiv Independent. I cover politics, corruption, and reforms. We received a question from one of our members. Do any of you guys know why Ukraine blew up that Iranian cargo ship on Saturday? So one of the main reasons is that Iran is an ally of Moscow, and Iran has supported Russia's war effort since 2022. And Ukraine said that the ship was transporting military cargo between Russia and Iran, although it was not clear immediately in which direction, but most likely this ship was transporting some military supplies from Iran to Russia, and there is the suspicion that it was transporting components for drones. This is one of the main reasons. Another possible reason is that Ukraine seeks to show that it is an ally of the United States, and when Trump is involved in his war against Iran, Zelensky is trying to show that Ukraine is on Washington's side, and in that way, Zelensky wants to receive U.S. support.
That's all for this week. We'll be back next Sunday with more news from Ukraine. If you appreciated this video, please consider becoming a member of the Kyiv Independent community. It's truly thanks to viewers like you that we can do this work, and we're so grateful for your support. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.